The fallen army would be there, Ryuk? This was Morgaine's reply, as Ryuk stood in shock for a while before he smiled. She understood him. She really did understand perfectly, and that was more than enough of an answer. Thank you, Morgaine. I won't make any promises since I suck at fulfilling them, but I will repay this one day, he said as Morgaine giggled. On a more serious note, you don't have to stress the half-fallen one, he said, as Morgaine shrugged before her eyes flashed with interest, and she asked, so you struck a deal with the 10 families' leaders, and it included them showing up, right? Morgaine said, as Ryuk nodded. Then what if they failed to come? What was the other end of the deal? Morgaine asked curiously, as Ryuk furrowed his eyebrows, remembering the words he had given the 10 family leaders if they didn't heed humanity's call. A dangerous light flashed in his eyes, and for a tenth of a second, Morgaine seemed to see the world ending into nothing. All she saw was a world of darkness, where Ryuk remained in the same position, but behind him, piercing huge eyes lurking form the shadows that screamed of murder and madness flashed. The sensation was as gone as it came, and Ryuk simply rose back up. I'll be a human, the race they left to die alone. That was the other end of the deal, he replied with a playful smirk, which Morgaine knew better than to ignore. I've left the academy, she suddenly said, causing Ryuk to pause. You did? Yes. But why? You just had less than a few months to finish. Why leave now? No. I got the certificates, she said, as Ryuk made to sit by her side. She reached for her device, surfing through it, and showed it to him. It truly was a congratulatory certificate for her having finished and graduated from the Ascension Academy. Something that left Ryuk speechless. Was I gone for a year and not 3 weeks? He wondered, his perplexed expression bringing a giggle to Morgaine. You forgot my mother is the half-fallen one? She asked, as Ryuk's eyes flashed in realization. Oh, she pulled some strings for you, huh? He said as Morgaine giggled. No, she didn't. I graduated fair and square. Yeah, right? Ryuk said with an eye roll. I didn't have much else to do in the academy anyway. The first 2 years are for the training. The 3rd year is the academy trying to place you in a category where you can work or be useful for them. Is trying to give you a future with them. My mother thinks I don't need that, and the Ascension Academy agreed. I'm the fallen princess. It would be wild if they wanted me to be one of their workers, even if the pay is beyond my imagination, and truth be told, that was their wish. But with mother interjecting, they'd rather give me up and hand the certificate than face her wrath. So I got the certificate, she said, and Ryuk understood now, but that also led to another realization. So, you're heading back to the castle? Ryuk asked her, and Morgaine nodded, rubbing her arms. I wanted you to come back too, you know? It was once home, you know? Even if you only stayed for a short time, Morgaine said, stuttering as she did, and Ryuk's eyebrows furrowed. Perhaps it was because of him that she wanted to even listen to her mother in the first place. And truth be told, Morgaine had her plans. She only agreed to go back to the castle because there really wasn't much to do in the academy in the first place. She had some aim in her life, which was entering interdimensional gates and completing quests until she eventually faces an enemy that will take away her misery of a life. But that was because of his absence. Now that he was back here and wouldn't be in the academy anymore, she didn't see much sense in fighting alone anymore. That was why she'd eventually agreed when her mother started pressuring her about her duty as the fallen princess back home. Ryuk had once been in the castle. It had once been their home, and she didn't remember him repulsing it. He would have been fine, and she would take on any burden her mother was willing to throw on her, so long as he got to be by her side. But now that doesn't seem to be happening soon. Plans changed, and they've changed massively. She was distracted out of her thoughts when she felt the cold graze on her cheek that brought her face to this. I'll find time to come. It might not be now or tomorrow, but I'll show up and hang in for some time or maybe even forever. I swear it, he said, bringing some bit of serenity to her aching heart. The moonlight coming from the filtering roof woke them up from their pause, as Ryuk looked at the full moon in the dark night sky. Seems like it's late, Morgaine mused to herself, as Ryuk nodded. But his face changed when he felt the world blitzed by, and when it stopped, she was already before a golden door. Morgaine stepped into it, revealing her bedroom. "Then you're staying in for the night," she said with a sinister smirk, as she headed to the bed, and Ryuk shrugged helplessly. The Null's Gate hadn't opened yet, so he might as well still keep things cool, although he would like to instantly resume his cultivation immediately, as there was still so much to learn. But he was also aware that it wasn't just about him anymore now. She also needed his attention and presence, and if it's just for a night, then he was cool with it. "Fine by me," Ryuk said as he hopped into the bed. But then, a heavy thudding sound surprised them as Morgaine, who had sneakily moved closer and closer to him, suddenly felt her face slamming into a hard-scaled surface, as the temperature in the room seemed to drop by hundreds of times. "You," Morgaine said, as she wiped her nose and while looking up. Isha smirked sinisterly at her as Morgaine's expression dropped massively. "You, Tage, you dickhead bastards. Hehehe. No. No way. Get off." Morgaine screamed at Isha as she tried to push her off, but she only earned Ryuk and Isha's evil giggles as they watched Morgaine flare out all her hidden energy, yet still failing to move Isha even an inch. Ryuk, lying on the opposite side, just watched with an evil smirk. "I swear, Ryuk, take back Isha this instant. Can't we just have a good night's sleep without any disturbance?" Morgaine complained, her hands finally collapsing in exhaustion. Pushing Isha away didn't work at all. She was like a mountain. "Nope," Ryuk said, burrowing himself deeper into the mattress. "You dickhead. Why did you even let her grow this big? What are you feeding her, you dickhead?" Morgaine roared in frustration, pushing against Isha's stomach, who only giggled devilishly as she felt the press against her sensory-filled tummy. A massage like that was rare. "TCH in your dreams," Morgaine huffed, getting down from the bed and running to Ryuk's other side, trying to force her way. But the moment she fell onto him, Ryuk was gone. In a blink, Isha had moved Ryuk to her other side, and Morgaine was back at square one. You dickhead," Morgaine screamed again, but then her eyes flashed as she rose from the bed and laid down on the golden gem floor. "And what are you doing?" Ryuk asked when he no longer felt her presence on the bed. "I won't be sleeping on the bed," Morgaine declared. "Why is that?" Ryuk asked, perplexed. "Because of Isha. She's too cold. I can't handle the cold oozing from her," Morgaine said, watching as Ryuk's and Isha's gazes dropped. "Isha's been on the bed since the first day we slept on it together, and you've been fine," Ryuk pointed out. "Well, I didn't want to complain before, but now I can't accept it any longer. Get Isha off the bed, or I stay on the ground. Your choice." Morgaine smirked sinisterly. Ryuk looked at her for a while before sighing helplessly and burrowing even deeper into Isha's side. "How comforting," he mumbled before drifting into sleep. Soon, golden smoke puffed out of Morgaine's nose. "That's it. Ryuk, you dickhead. I won't forgive you," Morgaine shouted as she rose up and pounced toward Ryuk, a golden ball of energy shooting forward. But halfway through, a claw appeared, tearing it into bits. But that didn't stop her at all. Morgaine kept lunging, punching, and throwing blast after blast toward Ryuk, but every single one missed due to the claws intercepting them. The confrontation got worse and worse, until Morgaine started sweating hard. But then the entire house also began shaking so badly that, in the end, Ryuk could only sigh as Isha disappeared back into the pet space. The remaining golden blasts, still on their way to him, suddenly vanished as a dark void materialized in front of Ryuk. The energy balls disappeared into the darkness. "Ha!" A puzzled noise left Morgaine's lips. She had never seen Ryuk use a vortex ability before. Then, she turned to look toward the window, where another void opened up, spitting her golden blasts into the sky, dispelling them into nothing. Only then did she turn her gaze downward, toward Ryuk's chest, and discovered a new presence. A dark cat the size of a mature puppy. The sharp growl left the cat's maw as it bared its fangs at Morgaine, but then quieted down when Ryuk gently rubbed its head. Its aggressive expression softened into a cute, You got a new pet?" Morgaine asked in shock, but then she finally remembered. Isha was gone. She desperately crawled toward Ryuk, using a finger to swerve the cat to one side and wrapping tightly around him like a python. "What the? Get off!" Ryuk tried to say, but he fell silent when he felt soft lips wrapped around his. His words stuck in his throat, and half his brain abilities flickered off. It lasted long enough for him to forget what he wanted to say as Morgaine whispered, "Do you still want me to get off?" She looked up with puppy eyes. Ryuk hesitated before replying. On second thought, I think I don't actually mind you staying." Giggle. "You pervert," Morgaine mocked, but her eyes flashed when she suddenly saw a dark vortex appear on Ryuk's chest, and the cat soon stepped out of it. Its pitch-dark blue eyes narrowed at her. Only now did she remember. She had pushed it off to one side previously. A guilty expression appeared on her face as she stretched her hand toward the cat, who bared its maw at her, but calmed down after Ryuk's petting. Morgaine tried to stretch her hand to touch it, but it quickly dodged and bared its maw at her again, forcing her to retreat. "You never told me you got a new pet, and why do they never like me?" she screamed in injustice, glaring at the cat, who was acting cozier than she had ever seen Isha act toward Ryuk. Yet, whenever she tried to touch it, she only received a warning snarl. She still remembered the first time she had met Isha, how the creature had welcomed her by slapping her hands away from Ryuk, and now this cat was preventing her from touching it at all. They all loved Ryuk, but none of them liked her. Even till now, Isha only found her interesting because she was mischievous and loved testing her patience. "Maybe you're just not the animal type," Ryuk said with a shrug. "I am more of an animal person than you'll ever be," she pouted. Ryuk smirked sinisterly. "I don't disagree. You dickhead," she screamed, her voice drowned out by Ryuk's evil chuckle, until he got serious. He only brought the cat out because he wanted to introduce her to Morgaine in the first place. "The cat is newly born. It's grown bigger than I thought, though, and it's even already using its ability," Ryuk mused to himself as he looked at the kitten and couldn't help but notice. It had gotten a little bigger than before, about 4 times bigger, and now it was already about to use its void vortex ability to move itself and even teleported Morgaine's golden ball away from him, throwing them outside the house. That was some massive improvement in a little more than 3 weeks. "The cat? That doesn't sound like you. Haven't you named it yet?" Morgaine asked. "That's true," Ryuk muttered beneath his breath. He still hadn't named his second pet, and that just went to show how much more time he needed with it. "Well, what do you think of Voidy? Cool name, since it's as dark as the void, and it also uses a void portal teleportation ability," Morgaine suggested. Ryuk's eyes flashed with light. "Voidy, huh?" He mused but then shook his head. "That sounds girly." "Void. That is perfect," he said, his brilliant eyes flashing as Morgaine rolled her eyes. "What do you say, buddy?" "Void, huh?" Ryuk asked, lifting the void kitten up like a baby. His fingers vibrated as he scratched its armpit, causing it to release a gurgling, purring sound. "Congratulations. Host has successfully named his new pet, Void. Rewards. 1. System shop integration of Void's attributes will now begin. 2. Host's bond with Void has successfully doubled." The notification flashed in front of Ryuk as he nodded in satisfaction. "Good," Ryuk mused to himself, lying back on his bed as Void nestled on the pillow, its tiny side pressing against his cheek. Silence eventually covered the room, and as peace descended, the light naturally dimmed. The rhythm of the illumination slowed, until the moonlight was the brightest source in the cozy bedroom. Ryuk felt a body wrap around him like a snake, and he could only roll his eyes at first when he felt hot breath on the side of his face. But then, his expression changed into a small smile when he saw Morgaine had truly dozed off. Know that she was trying to be a clingy Isha. The silence of the room and its coziness eventually made his eyelids grow heavy. Just as he was about to drift off, his eyes flickered open, because the instant he closed them, he saw it. A shadowy hand, stretching out from where its owner's face should have been. A sudden jerk of fear coursed through him, his body vibrating intensely. His heartbeat spiked, pounding hard against his ribs, and the sudden movement startled Morgaine awake. She furrowed her eyebrows upon sensing his pounding heart, then opened her eyes to see cold air leaving Ryuk's lips, more than usual. "What's wrong?" Morgaine asked. Ryuk exhaled before forcing a reassuring smile. "It's fine. Now shoo away, go to sleep," he said, pulling her closer into his embrace. She didn't refuse, and soon her breathing became slow and rhythmic as she drifted off once more. Hours passed. The stars brightened, marking the darkest hour of the night. Yet Ryuk's eyes remained open. He only closed them when Morgaine stirred, because every time he shut them, all he saw was the horror of that nightmarish figure. "I'm not strong enough. I need more strength, more power to face the fears." In a world as dark as the deepest abyss, there was no sky, only an endless, crushing void, stretching infinitely in all directions. No stars, no moons, not even the illusion of distant light. The very concept of illumination seemed to have been erased, devoured by a darkness so absolute it felt alive, pressing down like gravity. The ground beneath was not soil nor stone, but a surface that seemed solid yet shifted beneath the feet, as if refusing to be truly real. Cracks laced through its abyssal expanse, pulsing with a darkness so deep that it was visible even in the void itself, the last traces of energy from long-forgotten worlds. Here, in this forsaken land, nothing was dead, because nothing had ever truly been alive. Towering above the forsaken landscape were the dark castles. Monolithic structures of blackened voidstone. Their jagged spires reached high, yet were consumed by the endless night above, making them seem without end. A single glance would make one doubt they had ever been built at all. Rather, it felt as if they had grown out from the abyss itself. Their surfaces shifted and rippled like the ground beneath them, seeming to slip in and out of existence at will. All bore gaping maws instead of doors, as if they devoured anything that dared to enter. Others had unmoving figures carved into their exteriors, barely distinguishable from the walls they were fused with, watching. But then, there were the true horrors of this place. The creatures. They lurked in the open, yet somehow remained hidden. Beings of abyssal corruption. Their bodies flickered between form and formlessness, dark energy rolling off them like dying flames, yet never truly fading. They seemed no different from mutated beasts, except for the slight, distinguishable features that warped them into something far worse. Some had elongated limbs that dragged across the blackened ground, while others were eyeless yet aware. And for their bodies, the darkness pulsated like flames. Not heat, not light, but something else entirely. Something that dissolved sanity upon prolonged exposure. Abyssal energy. They did not move at all, yet the moment one gazed at the blackened ground, they would see millions of these flickering, unblinking eyes staring back at them. And in the heart of this darkness, there was a castle, twice as large and twice as dark as the others. Yet unlike the others, which bore gaping maws for doors, this one had gates. Pitch-black iron, lined with intricate carvings of crimson, as if painted with fresh blood. It was the only castle with a color other than darkness. Then, before the gates, a humongous figure emerged. Towering at nearly 12 meters in height, its form was shrouded in abyssal energy. If one looked closely, they would notice something off. Of its 5 monstrous fingers, 2 were missing, severed cleanly, yet still oozing with intense, writhing abyssal power. The figure raised its massive palm to the gates. A ripple of energy emanated from its touch, spreading through it. Then, a deep, droning sound rang out as the gates creaked open, revealing nothing but pitch blackness beyond. The towering figure stepped in. Within, a chamber stood, one it had walked into countless times before. Then, boom! It was the sound of a knee crashing to the ground. I, Azruith, the unworthy, pay my greetings to the seventh calamity. The thick voice echoed through the throne room, bouncing off the walls and rapidly rang forth into the distance until it reached a space where it suddenly faded away into nothingness, seemingly absorbed by the intense darkness. Silence. It was what followed after the greetings, and even though no reply came, the kneeling Azruith slowly rose to its feet and took measured steps forward. The path to the throne was no mere corridor. If anything, it was a descent, a slow, agonizing plunge into deeper darkness, where each step seemed to strip away something intangible from him. Even though his massive form held immense power beneath his feet, his footsteps refused to make a sound, as if in fear of whatever horror lay ahead in the distance. Around him were with twisted carvings lining the hallway like knights. Their hulking bodies exuded an inhuman menace, enough to instill fear even within a null like him. The only comforting thought was that they seemed to be nothing more than what they were, statues. Behind them, ancient depictions lined the walls, art so sinister that their meanings had long been lost to Azruith. There were no torches nor flames, only lingering sigils rusted into the stone like scars, pulsing faintly with a sickly crimson glow. Years of existence had taught Azruith their meaning. These were not mere symbols. They were warnings. There were dark castles within these wall engravings, their structures writhing as if barely contained within the artwork, and from the balconies above, figures stood motionless, their unseen eyes fixated upon Azruith with every step he took. Yet the pressure was well endured. He bore it without faltering until he arrived at the end of the throne room. And then, as if summoned by the darkness of his thoughts, the throne appeared. A monolith of blackened voidstone fused with bones, flesh, and the memories of those who had dared to oppose its owner. Shadows coiled around its surface, slithering and writhing, forming faces that screamed without sound before vanishing into the darkness once more. The air here did not merely weigh upon Azruith's presence. It sought to crush him. His colossal form flickered, his flame-like essence twisting wildly as his ashen body trembled with unease. It was not the weight of power that shook him. No, it was the twisted horror that sat upon that unspeakable throne. A presence so suffocating that Azruith struggled to hold onto his sanity and collapsed helplessly to his knees. The figure did not move, yet Azruith felt him in every inch of the space. This was the seventh calamity. He was not a king. He was not a god. He was not even a creature. He was the abyss itself, given form. And with Azruith collapsing on his hands, he slowly stretched them out, letting them fall onto the ground before him. His face buried flat into the cold stone. His body curled before his lord like a man before his lord. For truly he had arrived before his lord. A lone figure draped in a simple robe of darkness. In his arms rested a crimson staff, gripped tightly by a blackened skeletal hand, seemingly serving as its support. Upon his shoulder sat a simple creature, a dark bird with a pair of runic tattoos in its eyes, flashing with an unthinkable amount of uncanny intelligence and wisdom. A creature that would awaken the rage of a certain someone beyond the heavens. "Oh, Azruith," the void echoed out, its voice surprisingly clearer than even the purest of quiet lakes. "Oh, Azruith." He called out once more, yet Azruith remained in his position. "Oh, Azruith." The call came a third time, the shadows in the area slowly distorting, as if a strange force was descending upon them. "Of all things you could have let me down with, Azruith. Why my worst nemesis? Why defeat, Azruith?" The voice echoed, filled with such intense sorrow that Azruith felt a chill crawl down his body. His form began vibrating uncontrollably, and slowly he rose up. If one could see, they would witness crimson-like tears dripping from Azruith's eyes. "Oh, my lord, I have truly let you down with my defeat. Half my army was wiped out in a minor world, and I lost my hold on the portal before the other half could be deployed, my lord. Nothing, my lord, nothing can compensate for this stain that I have left upon you, except with my death, oh my lord," Azruith declared, bowing his face to the ground once more at the foot of the being. "Have you come to me to bring an end to yourself, Azruith?" the seventh calamity asked. "Verily, I have come to atone for my sins, my lord. But before then, I have something I wish my lord would pay attention to." A silence covered the room before it was shattered by the command. "Speak." "Half my army was destroyed by a single lone existence in a wild world. While this can be attributed to my weakness, I believe things are more than they seem, my lord. This being slaughters us nulls with relative ease. His dark scythe rips away our abyssal life with ease, and before him, our supreme regeneration ability is useless. But not only that, my lord. My fingers that were severed by his scythe, which ought to have regenerated already, my lord, they remain like this." Azruith slowly stretched out his hands toward the dark-robed figure. His severed fingers, which ought to have healed no matter how much abyssal energy was forced into them, remained lifeless. No matter the effort, they refused to regenerate. Silence. Absolute silence. It covered the throne room completely for a time so long that Azruith could not fathom its length. But then, finally, the voice broke through the abyssal stillness. Oh, Azruith, have you any idea what you have found, Azruith?" "I know of nothing, my lord, except what you have taught me." "You have found the Lost One, Azruith." The Lost One." Azruith screamed out in shock and horror as an evil cackle rang out from the lips of the dark bird sitting on the seventh calamity's shoulder. "But that's too soon. The evil order predicted his existence would only be discovered a century from now." "How? Do you doubt my words, Azruith?" the seventh calamity called out as Azruith staggered on his knees, his forehead slamming into the ground. "I dare not, my lord." "Tell me, then, why we nulls are able to easily overtake worlds and turn them into a dark Gomer," the seventh calamity asked, as Azruith began. "Firstly, it is due to our unrivaled might, my lord. And secondly, the wild worlds are easy to overtake because most of the time, they are just beginning to be introduced to apex energy. The energy connection is too low and hence not very effective against our abyssal energy that has been cultivated for millennia in the abyss. That is why even their best attacks from their greatest warriors can cleave through us. But we regenerate in a matter of seconds, as their power is not potent enough to snuff us out with a single strike. This gives us the advantage of endless regeneration when we descend onto the lower worlds," Azruith explained. "So tell me, Azruith, how come the one you faced was able to easily wipe your army out with a simple cleave and render your natural ability of regeneration null?" the seventh calamity asked as Azruith paused, unable to say more. "The only energy in this universe that can rival our abyssal energy is Etherius, that hateful, disgusting energy. But even then, Etherius is only effective in wiping us out. It cannot absolutely cancel out our regeneration ability. Only null energy can truly fully cancel out another null's energy. Only a null against a null can truly prevent the other from regenerating, making a scar in the other. But even then, the scars are never permanent. But a single being exists, one beyond this primordial rule. When Etherius and abyssal energies from different opposing sources, merge together," the seventh calamity said before pausing as Azruith's eyes flashed in horror, and he unconsciously completed the words. "The result is an energy that both power sources will pale in contrast to. It is the birth of hurricane energy, the energy of the ultimate null king," Azruith said as the seventh calamity slowly rose to his feet, and Azruith's face changed massively. In an instant, his body began disintegrating into nothing but ashes, as the entire world seemed to unravel itself. Azruith's body sank instantly onto the ground, the weight of thousands of worlds crushing him until, boom! A massive explosion rumbled outward as Azruith blew up with a loud bang, unable to handle the incredulous power wave undulating from the seventh calamity's mere motion of rising. And so, a null close to the peak of the cataclysm stage was destroyed in body from mere bodily pressure. But then, something, a dark wisp, rose from the place where Azruith had collapsed, rising up into the air and floating toward the seventh calamity, entering into the dark shadow where his face should be. The sound of crushing rang out for a few seconds before it stopped. And from the robes, 2 crimson lights flared outward, flashing with thousands upon thousands of images before settling onto a single figure. A snow-white-haired figure, cleaving in the motion of a scythe strike. "I have finally found you, little dark one." A sinister cackle left the lips of the crow on the seventh calamity's shoulder, ringing loud and clear with a spine-tingling effect in the dark space before it quieted down as the seventh calamity took his seat. Then he stretched out his staff towards the ground, and crimson runic lines appeared in the air, soon turning into 3 and instantly disappearing into the room, appearing before 3 statues among the line of statues and burrowing into them. "Rise, my loyal legion, to the call of your lord." The seventh calamity's voice took a dark turn, sounding like the screams and shrills of thousands of beings, as the runic lines disappeared into the forehead of 3 of the statues in the room, and their deep red eyes began flashing with power before the abyssal throne room shook as a horrifying aura burst out like a dam breaking. In an instant, 3 beings in total appeared before the seventh calamity, all on one knee with their heads bowed. The abyssal energy in that world is too low, and hence it will reject my descent. It needs more chaos. Go down to that world with your armies and cause more chaos. Do not return unless you, along with your armies, are wiped out, or you have managed to wipe out all life that exists in that world. Now, leave, he commanded as the abyss on the ground opened up and swallowed the 3 kneeling figures, returning the throne room to abyssal silence once more. The seventh calamity slowly settled back on the throne before his crimson eyes began to close, but not without uttering, "Soon, little dark one. Soon." "Stop trying to delay and get on, you golden goof." Ryuk's voice resounded through the grassy plain, where 2 figures could be seen in front of a castle-like home, along with a sleek golden jet floating in the air. "No, I won't leave." Morgaine's reply resounded as Ryuk rolled his eyes, feeling the body that refused to get down from his back, no matter how hard he wiggled. "The jet's been there for an hour now, and it uses fuel, doesn't it? That's so much money getting burned every second." Ryuk pestered, as Morgaine protested. "I don't care. I won't leave." "Okay, Morgaine, what do you want?" "For you to come too," she whispered against his ear. "Okay, fine. I'll come. After the Null War," Ryuk said, as Morgaine kept silent. "I will try my best to do so. I swear it," he said, and finally Morgaine let go, leaving his back alone, only to turn and give him a kiss that Isha, who was watching at the side, would swear lasted for 100 years. "Goodbye, Morgaine." "It's not a goodbye, you dickhead," Morgaine screamed in fear as she boarded the jet, only to halt, and Ryuk laughed at her scared expression. "Okay then. See you soon." "Humph," Morgaine scoffed as the jet slowly lifted and began levitating into the sky. But even after it was long gone, Ryuk could still catch glimpses of her waving at him, and he could only wave back until the jet disappeared completely from his gaze. A deep inhale left Ryuk's lips as he looked at the disappearing jet and unknowingly exhaled loudly. Now he was alone and he could listen well to his thoughts. In the next instant, Ryuk's eyes flashed deep red as a vein tore out from beneath his skin, his teeth clattering from anger. "Damn 10 families! Damn you all!" He roared in rage as the clouds above him turned dark from the power that surged out of him, intense cold sweeping out from his body, freezing everything around him. He had thought the 10 families would see the better future and team up with humanity to confront the Nulls. It was their only way out if they ever wished to take on the Nulls. Yet what had the 10 families done? They had left humanity alone. They decided not to appear and instead sent their media to reveal to the world how humanity was doomed. In the end, they had chosen the path of greed, the money and power they could gain from the people's fears. They had disappointed him, and just as he swore, he would be dealing them world-ending damage that they would never recover from. "Who?" A deep exhale left Ryuk's lips as his powerful aura receded into him. There was no use getting mad at them. To him now, the 10 families were now an eternal enemy. Now was the time to focus on improving his strength, and the next thing to do after getting his frost cultivation up was his void energy cultivation. And for that, activate shop. Ryuk ordered, and instantly, a notification flashed as he navigated to the void area of the shop tab and began a deep scrutiny of the new products that had appeared. Void-aligned shop tab, shop, Category 1. Beast Nourishment, Abyssal Cores. Condensed fragments of void energy that nourish void-based creatures and enhance their cultivation. Cost: Small core, basic growth 50 points. Medium core, moderate growth 150 points. Large core, significant growth 400 points. Hollow Nectar, a dark, fluid-like essence that replenishes void energy, reserves, and strengthens affinities with the void. Cost: 100 points per serving. Eldritch Essence Cube, infused with concentrated void energy. Ideal for cultivating creatures attuned to the void. Cost: 500 points. Category 2. Beast Enhancers. Void Veil Elixir. Temporarily enhances a beast's ability to phase between existence and non-existence, making it nearly impossible to hit for 1 hour. Cost: 300 points. Ethereal Carapace Solution. Enhances a beast's outer defenses by partially shifting it out of reality, reducing damage taken. Permanent but provides minor enhancement. Cost: 700 points. Devouring Fang Serum. Unlocks latent void venom, allowing bites to dissolve matter and energy upon contact. Cost: 1,000 points. Category 3. Beast Taming Tools. Abyssal Bonding Crystal. Strengthens the connection between beast and tamer, increasing synchronization in combat. Cost: 800 points. Void Tether Collar. Binds a beast's existence to reality, preventing unstable void mutations while ensuring discipline. Cost: 600 points. Dimensional Anchor Ring. Keeps void beasts from phasing out of spacetime accidentally, stabilizing their presence in any environment. Cost: 1,200 points. Category 4. Beast Growth Items. Void Incubator. Enhances the growth of eggs or young creatures by immersing them in refined void apex energy. Cost: 2,500 points. Void Affinity Scroll. Grants a temporary skill to enhance the void kitten's energy manipulation. Cost: 1,000 points. Abyssal Evolution Stone Basic. Hastens a beast's evolution by exposing it to controlled void energy fluctuations. Cost: 1,800 points. Category 5. Cultivation Techniques. Beginner Techniques. Eternal Hollow Breathing Technique. A foundation-level void energy cultivation method that teaches the user to absorb ambient void apex energy into their primordial gate. Cost: 1,200 points. Benefits: enables slow but consistent absorption of void apex energy. Improves resistance to void corruption. Limitations: slow cultivation speed. Excessive use risks partial phasing into the void. Abyssal Pulse Method. A technique that allows the user to sense and channel void energy even in places where it's normally absent. Cost: 1,800 points. Benefits: allows void cultivation in any environment. Reduces exhaustion when using void abilities. Limitations: requires deep meditation. Overuse risks disconnecting from reality temporarily. Intermediate techniques. Hollow Core Sutra. A mid-tier void cultivation technique that forms a hollow core in the primordial gate, enhancing void energy reserves and enabling offensive void manipulation. Cost: 3,000 points. Benefits: increases void apex energy capacity by 50%. Grants a new skill. Void Surge. A concentrated blast that erases everything in its path. Enhances synchronization with void beasts. Limitations: requires mastery of a beginner-level technique. Excessive use may cause loss of senses momentarily. Abyss Walker Codex. A specialized technique that strengthens the link between user and void pets, granting them accelerated growth and recovery. Cost: 4,650 points. Benefits: boosts cultivation speed significantly, increases the void beast's adaptability and resilience, unlocks defensive skill. Abyss Veil, a temporary state where the user and beast phase partially into the void, making them untouchable for a few seconds. Limitations. Overuse may cause the user to slip deeper into the void, risking permanent loss of self. Advanced techniques. Void Azura Grimoire, a legendary technique that grants unparalleled control over void apex energy. Cost, 10,000 points. Benefits. Allows the user to generate void apex energy even in the absence of any external source. Unlocks devastating skill. Abyssal Oblivion, an erasure field that wipes everything in a fixed radius from existence. Grants a passive ability. Void Azura Physique, renders the user immune to all physical attacks unless reinforced by void apex energy. Limitations. Overuse may cause irreversible disconnection from reality, turning the user into an unstable void entity. Purchase points balance, 25,000. Who? A deep exhale left Ryuk's lips as he read through the list, his eyes flashing in shock, especially at the cultivation techniques. But then, even more joy filled him when he saw the end of the tab and noticed his balance. It was at 25,000, which meant that right now he could get all he wanted, unlike when he first started with Isha and barely had enough purchase points to get her a good dish. And without wasting any more time, Ryuk began his purchase. Buy! I'll purchase 3 Abyssal Evolution Stone, a total of 3 large core Abyssal Core Dish, a total of 3 Eldritch Essence Cube and the Void Azura Grimoire. Ryuk ordered immediately as the notification flashed. Abyssal Evolution Stone hastens a beast's evolution by exposing it to controlled void energy fluctuations. Cost, 1,800 points. A total of 3 will be 5,400 points. Abyssal Core, condensed fragments of void energy that nourish void-based creatures and enhance their cultivation. Cost, large core, significant growth, 400 points each. A total of 3 will be 1,200 points. Eldritch Essence Cube, infused with concentrated void energy, ideal for cultivating creatures attuned to the void. Cost, 500 points each. A total of 3 will be 1,500 points. Advanced techniques. Void Azura Grimoire, a legendary technique that grants unparalleled control over void apex energy. Cost, 10,000 points. Total cost of objects, 18,100 points. Purchase points available, 25,000. Does the host truly wish to exchange 18,100 points for the above objects? The system asked, and Ryuk nodded without a doubt. Congratulations! Purchase of 3 Abyssal Evolution Stones, 3 large Abyssal Cores, 3 Eldritch Essence Cubes, and the Void Azura Grimoire is successful. Remaining purchase points, 6,900. Immediately, Ryuk's consciousness dived into his shop storage, and he could already see the shiny objects waiting for him. In the next instant, he reappeared in the pet world, finding Void playing around in the snow. The kitten's eyes immediately locked onto Ryuk as soon as he entered, rushing into his embrace. After a few rubs, Ryuk took Void back to its cave before bringing out the 3 objects radiating an intense amount of void energy. Void's eyes widened into full circles at the sight. An Abyssal Evolution Stone, a large Abyssal Core, and an Eldritch Essence Cube. It's all yours, Void, Ryuk said with a grin as he placed the 3 objects on its bed and headed outside. Not even up to 5 seconds after Ryuk left, Void opened its maw, a vortex appearing instantly and sucking in all 3 objects at once. The sound of chewing and satisfied purring rang out as Void crushed the objects in its mouth all at once. It devoured everything, delivering a loud belching noise afterward. But then, its eyes widened in shock as its stomach began expanding uncontrollably until it was the size of a large balloon, 3 times bigger than Void's own head. The dark collapsed onto the bed, instantly knocked unconscious. Ryuk reappeared in the cave, smirking at the sight of the bulging stomach. That was too much. The system notification flashed, but Ryuk merely shrugged, watching curiously as a new set of runes began appearing on Void's body. Soon, a cocoon of void energy enveloped it, drawing in the void energy present in the cave toward itself. But on the positive side, the intense amount of void energy is enough for the void kitten to begin its first evolution. The system's voice echoed as Ryuk's eyes flashed with satisfaction. This was exactly what he wanted to make Void evolve fast. Unlike when he had begun raising Isha, he didn't have many points back then, which had undoubtedly slowed both his and Isha's growth. Previously, Ryuk had been stuck with lower-ranked dishes to feed Isha, and even he had to cultivate using only basic techniques. But now that he had Void and enough points, there was no reason to hold back. He had bought the highest-ranked dishes in the shop and fed them to Void all at once, instantly triggering its first evolution. He had also acquired the most advanced Void cultivation technique the shop had to offer from the very beginning. At this rate, it was only a matter of time before Void caught up to Isha's strength, and Ryuk's Void cultivation would soon match his first cultivation as well. "I'll purchase 2 more Void crystals for it," Ryuk ordered. Soon, 2 large, 2-meter-tall Void crystals, Void stones of a much higher grade, appeared in his hands. He placed them at the top of the cave, momentarily increasing the Void mana within the cave by 5 times. The cocoon surrounding Void brightened even more, greedily absorbing the energy within the cave. Ryuk could even sense Void's strength increasing at a crazy speed. "Grow, Void. Grow." Those were his last words before he disappeared from the cave, opening his eyes to the sight of the green plains once more. He turned his gaze upwards, finding Isha floating in the sky, her narrowed eyes locked onto the distance. Suspicious, Ryuk followed her gaze as the world zoomed in at incredible speed. Then, boom! A mega explosion surged from the distant horizon, followed by an intense, sickening aura that made Ryuk's nose scrunch up in disgust. His eyes flashed with faint anger, but he soon steadied himself. "Seems like it's begun." The ground beneath Ryuk shook as he appeared in the sky the next moment, plummeting down instantly to land on Isha's back. Isha flapped her 4 wings the instant he landed, soaring into the distance at horrifying speed. The space behind her cracked open and froze instantly, preventing its repair until she was far gone. Few minutes later, how interesting. The muttering came from none other than Ryuk's lips. His snow-white hair flapped with the wind as he gazed into the distance, where a heart-pounding sight unfolded. A gigantic dark portal covered the entire skies of Porion City, and carefully arranged like an army was none other than a battalion of nulls descending from the portals, hanging in the air. There were so many that the sky was no longer visible. Half of them had bird-like physiology, but what drew Ryuk's attention the most was the army standing on the ground, facing the nulls. "Seems like they aren't as bastardly as I thought." Porion City, Grade D. It was the largest and most populated city in all of Grade D. And being a city in Grade D, which in and of itself was the second least safe grade in the entirety of Endearth, only lagging behind Grade E, which was the well-known prison ground, its reputation was far from desirable. Grade D was home to many of the lower-leveled races, including Gorvins, a subterranean people with obsidian-like skin who thrived in darkness. The Velmari, an amphibious race capable of manipulating mist and water. The Oroliths, humanoids with crystalline growths on their bodies, capable of storing minute traces of apex energy but never wielding it in battle as well as humans. These were races with very low potential for apex energy and, therefore, were able to build some semblance of life here. Porion City, being the largest habitation of the entire Grade D, was where most of them had settled. Being the second lowest grade, Grade D wasn't without its own problems. However, many of the races here had grown accustomed to each other, and since they all had low, almost poor or even absent cultivation potential, violence was not something that could lead to the destruction of an entire race overnight. It was a place where 60% of humanity had decided to settle, their little haven. Well, that was until the mayor of Porion City announced the forced relocation of all races within the city to another location far away, but still within Grade D. The announcement, of course, had caused an uproar. The inhabitants of Porion City had spent centuries within this place. The city had been built with blood, sweat, and tears, and now they were all expected to evacuate, to leave their ancestral homes behind. It was a tough pill to swallow, and some refused to leave. But it wasn't long before they began witnessing the strange signs that appeared in the sky. Barely a week after the announcement, the sun soon vanished from the sky as the clouds turned dark and collapsed into a swirling vortex of shadow. The aura from the vortex alone was enough to carve horror into even the most stubborn hearts in Porion City. They were all low-level in cultivation, and the horrific pressure they felt from the gate was definitely not something ordinary that they could withstand. They had their suspicions, but the arrival of war jets and the sight of an entire human army moving into the city, accompanied by armored tanks larger than their homes, were enough to drown out the last bits of resistance they might have tried to hold on to. Especially since this army was from the illustrious Grade B. And they were here for only one reason, to deal with whatever was about to emerge from the vortex above their heads. If even the armies of Grade B were required to stop whatever was coming, then they didn't need to be told that their chances of survival were close to zero. Still, they had enjoyed their comfort, and the mayor of Porion City had been able to provide them with that. A promise had been made that their evacuation was only temporary, and once the gate in the sky was dealt with, they would return. That promise was enough to convince the remaining inhabitants of Porion City to leave, assisted by the human army, which lent out their specialized aircraft for transportation. But even as the mayor oversaw the evacuation, he had a sinking feeling that his city would be left half-destroyed once all the inhabitants were gone. As the mayor, he had been privy to the real reasons behind the evacuation, and his worst fears had been confirmed when he witnessed the arrival of the Nulls. His city had been half torn down. Houses had been reduced to rubble, the land flattened to create open space. He had watched as the place he had once dreamed of turning into something great under his rule was reduced to a preemptive battlefield. But all of this, he could only swallow helplessly. It was clear that they were trying to save his people from their absolute destruction. To sacrifice his city for his people, it was a tough pill to swallow. But in the end, he had no choice but to accept it. Could he have stopped them, even if he wanted to? Eventually, he boarded the jet as well and was evacuated from the area. This was the fate of the weak in Endearth. When war reached the weak, their only choice was to lay their power before the strong, bowing to their every whim without daring to say a word in defiance, out of fear of destruction. A cruel fate to endure, but one that could have been far worse. Right now, weeks had passed since the evacuation of Porion City's inhabitants, and many developments had taken place. The presence of the human army had increased, and now, to Ryuk's knowledge, their forces had grown to include 2 gigantic mothercrafts, each rivaling a 10-story building in size, along with various smaller jets that trailed behind them. Numerous ammunitions ran along their edges, runic lines oozing with monstrous amounts of apex energy. On the ground, tanks the size of stacked bungalows hovered, their massive muzzles pointing forward at the humanoid Nulls standing on the ground. Compared to the first time he had seen the army battling the initial Null emergence, it was clear that humanity had prepared itself well for this war. They were fully armed to the teeth, and their technological advancements far surpassed anything Ryuk had ever seen in his life. A clear sign that Mad White had done some serious work behind the scenes. But it wasn't just humanity that stood before the Nulls. There were a total of about 10 other mothercrafts, each bearing different insignias. And in front of them stood at least 5,000 warriors, clad in armor and wielding runic weapons that wouldn't pale in comparison to the technological artifacts possessed by the humans. These were, of course, the 10 family armies. In the end, they had heeded humanity's call and decided to join forces against the Nulls. Is that a frost wyvern? Murmurs filled the air as Isha flew forward toward the battlefield, and various jets immediately turned their munitions her. But just before they could go all out firing, they stopped when they sighted the figure behind the frost wyvern. Is that a Naga's? One of the Naga's army members wondered aloud. Among the 10 families, they were the only ones who had frost wyverns as their companions. So seeing one now, even though greatly surprising, made sense. After all, frost wyverns were only ridden by their most powerful figures. They could at least guess that whoever stood on it would be a Naga's. But when Isha drew closer, they widened their eyes as she took a detour, swerving toward humanity's army. This drew raised eyebrows from the other families, whose eyes narrowed at the frost wyvern before flashing in shock. A human? What's a human doing with a frost wyvern? Could he be a beast tamer? How did he even lay his hands on a frost wyvern in the first place? Against the murmurs, Ryuk remained unfazed. Instead, his gaze scanned through the 10 families' army, recognizing their strengths. He eventually gave a nod as Isha floated above the human army, while Ryuk's gaze combed through the crowd. There were a couple of faces he had no idea about, older warriors whose reputations preceded them. But among them, one figure stood out, one he immediately recognized. None other than Mad White. Isha descended to the ground, and Ryuk stepped down before withdrawing her back into his pet world. "And here you finally are, kiddo," Mad White called out to him, nudging him by the shoulder. Ryuk smiled in acknowledgement, but soon he felt several gazes on him. Turning, he witnessed a group of elders dressed in cybernetic combat suits staring at him from the side. The 10 families truly heed the call. "I'm surprised," Ryuk stated, glancing at the gathering. Mad White nodded in agreement. "Just like I told you, although this might be nothing more than a fraction of their true armies, this at least gives us a much better chance of surviving the second null descent." Mad White replied. Ryuk nodded before turning his head to the sky. "There are a couple of human commanders I want to introduce you to, Ryuk," Mad White said. Ryuk furrowed his eyebrows before shaking his head. "Not now. Everyone might look calm, but they're all under monumental pressure. An introduction would be nice, but only after the war has been completed." Mad White's eyes flashed for a moment before he nodded his head. "So tell me, why? Why aren't we attacking yet?" "The Nulls are already descending out of the gate," Ryuk stated, looking up at the sky. He noticed that the Nulls had already begun climbing down, yet for some reason they were lining themselves up in formation, eerily similar to the way the Endearth armies were also lined up. It was as if some sort of truce had been called by both sides, preventing either from making a move until it was broken. Ryuk didn't understand it. "We can't attack now," Mad White said, drawing a cursory glance from Ryuk. "You see, for the Nulls to enter, they need to open a wormhole. And a wormhole is best opened through the destabilization of space. Behind these portals, there would be null figures who are working to destabilize space to allow the sleepers to come in. If we attack now, our attacks will lead to further destabilization of space, making it easier for the Nulls to come in. We'd essentially be aiding them. The best thing is to wait and allow the Nulls to drain their energy trying to destabilize space. That will help in reducing the energy of the walkers behind the portals," Mad White explained. Ryuk's eyes flickered with understanding, but he couldn't help but notice some unfamiliar terms Mad White had used. "Sleepers? Walkers? Do those refer to the Nulls?" Ryuk asked. Mad White nodded. "The Nulls have their classifications. The first and lowest classification is the Sleepers. They are the ones that seem no different from mutated beasts and are the weakest of the Null army, just like the ones right above our heads." Ryuk looked at the Nulls, who truly seemed no different compared to normal mutated beasts, except for the dark energy they were oozing. They were the exact ones he had faced the previous time too. "The Sleepers are the weakest of the Null army, but their cultivation stages are equivalent to Grade C to Grade B creatures," Mad White said. Ryuk's eyes flashed in realization. Even the weakest of the Nulls are at least Grade C. No wonder people's eyes flash in horror when the Nulls are mentioned. Even the weakest of them rival the strongest power levels of some city forces on Endearth. The second level of the Nulls is the Walkers. They are usually able to control the Sleepers and are the ones who have the power to open up portals to other worlds. Mad White explained. Ryuk's mind flashed back to the first time he had faced the Nulls. He remembered the figure whose hands were pulling apart the void, allowing the other sleeper Nulls to enter. That must have been a Walker. The weakest of the Walkers is a Grade A creature, the Cataclysm stage. The strongest of them is at the peak of the Cataclysm stage, though those are very rare. The Walkers are much rarer, and I'm guessing there should be 3 walkers behind that vortex, responsible for sending the nulls out. Space fights back against anything that tries to destabilize it. So as the vortex is being opened and the sleepers are coming in, the walkers are also exhausting a great amount of power. When the space finally stabilizes and they can enter, they would have fallen in power by at least 2/3 of their normal strength, making them easier to defeat. That's why we're waiting, Mad White explained directly. Ryuk now understood. But as he looked at the portal, he couldn't help but feel his heart pounding within his chest. A pulse he knew well, one of danger. But he also knew well that a creature at the Cataclysm stage shouldn't be able to make him feel danger at his current cultivation level. So why? Tell me, Mad White, Ryuk called. What is that? There couldn't be any nulls greater in power than the walkers. Could there? The questions caused a pang to echo in Mad White's heart, but it wasn't only Mad White who felt the pang within him. Even though Ryuk didn't call the words out loud, the majority of powerhouses on the battlefield had hearing that was above the limits and could easily pick up on their conversation. They all couldn't help but furrow their eyebrows from Ryuk's bizarre question. Mad White asked with a raised eyebrow, shocked by the question. Why are you asking that, Ryuk? Mad White chirped back. But then, the magnificent sound of space suddenly getting torn faster with speed echoed out as the entire army turned their heads above to look at the portal. Soon, they noticed a gigantic leg, the size of a pillar, stepped out of the gate, and then its entire body followed suit. It revealed a null, half-humanoid and half-beastly monstrous in shape, with an incredible amount of abyssal energy rippling off from its form. Behind its back, long tendrils of dark energy dangled, but then it wasn't only one. Another huge leg soon stepped out, and then another, until color seemed to fade away from most of the armies below as they witnessed a total of 10 of these enormous humanoid-looking nulls stepping fully out of the gate. Finally, they're here, Mad White said with a grin as Ryuk furrowed his eyebrows. So those are the walkers? Yes, they're the ones that open the gate. Now that they're in, the gate would naturally close by itself, Mad White said with a smirk. But then, the various race commanders all paused when they witnessed the walkers standing in the air. Instead of engaging in battle, they stood in the air at the front of the sleepers and remained motionless, just like them. What the hell is going on? Why aren't they attacking yet? Shouldn't the gate be closing now? The army's murmurs grew as the various race commanders unconsciously turned their gazes to Mad White, who seemed to know best about the nulls, waiting for an answer. Remind me of something, Mad White. Aha! You said the walkers are the ones that open the gates, and in so doing, they expend their energy, making them weaker when they step in, right? Ryuk questioned, and Mad White nodded his head with furrowed eyebrows. Well, how come the 10 walkers don't seem to have their auras weakening at all? It's like they've also been waiting behind, just like the sleepers. Besides, if it was the walkers that were keeping the gate open, now that they're all in, shouldn't the gate have closed? Why is the vortex still rotating? Ryuk's flow of questions came, each one sending pangs reverberating through Mad White's chest. Unless, Mad White started, as Ryuk noticed the hair behind his neck rising. Unless what? Ryuk asked, perplexed. Unless the walkers aren't the ones opening the gates. It is the wanderers. But that's impossible, Mad White stated, blinking in shock, but his shoulder got grabbed tightly by Ryuk as he was brought back to reality. Who are the wanderers, Mad White? They are the third nulls and the strongest. They control the walkers themselves. They're a myth, as they've only ever appeared once in the recorded Null War, and that was during the last Null War, which was around the 7th Null entrance. This is just the 2nd Null entrance. How is it possible that they're already descending? That's too early. Too early, Mad White said as Ryuk's eyes flashed, and he asked the important question bugging his mind. So the sleepers are equal to the foundation stage, and the walkers are at the cataclysm stage. If so, what is the cultivation level of these wanderers? Ryuk asked, as Mad White opened his lips, only to close them back. Then an angered th left his lips as he tried to think before he answered. Pseudo-eternal stage. Immediately after Mad White answered, the entire vortex in the sky was suddenly ripped into two, completely torn apart, and instantly, a figure stepped out. Unlike the walkers, who were gigantic in size, about 20 meters in height, the Null was around 3 meters tall, completely clad in armor that oozed with purple energy instead of dark energy, enough to completely hide its features. It seemed absolutely no different from an untransformed Titan in armor. A wanderer, the Titan commander called out, the world quieting down to a pause upon the appearance of the creature, whose gaze flickered at them below. But then, it soon raised its gaze back to the portal before raising up its right hand, a runic circle appearing on it before it slapped it upwards toward the ripped open vortex. What followed was a deafening sound of space seemingly being ripped twice again, and in the next instant, an unbelievably powerful aura burst through the world recklessly. It was like a dam had suddenly opened, enough to send the mothercraft and the jets hanging in the air shifting a few meters backward from the incredibly powerful wave. Two more beings stepped down from the gate, and the dark vortex in the sky immediately faded into the air, the sky reverting back to its blue color. But then, it soon turned purple, arising from the sheer power wave of the beings who stood in the sky. 3. A total of 3 wanderers. A commander's horror-filled whisper echoed out from afar, as even Ryuk's eyes flashed with a bit of caution watching the notification instantly appear before his gaze. Warning! Warning! A total of 3 nulls at the pseudo-eternal stage has been discovered. A power enough to kill the host has been recognized. Main quest issued. Quest information. A total of 3 pseudo-eternal grade nulls have descended upon the Endiarthian army and possess the capability to wipe them all out. Host must negate the doomed fate of the gathered Endiarthian armies. Rewards? Close to 30,000 sleeper nulls, ranging from low grade C to peak grade B. A total of 10 walkers with cultivation stages rivaling the Cataclysm stage, and 3 of them even close to the peak of it. And then, another 3 wanderers with the cultivation stage of pseudo-eternal. Ryuk mused to himself as he swerved away, the notification flashing in his gaze, turning back to analyze the battlefield. The human army consists of a total of 10,000, all within grade C to grade B. The other families have 5,000 warriors each, and since there are 10 of them, that amounts to about 50,000 warriors. Combined with the humans' 10,000, that's nearly 60,000 sleepers. Literally double the amount of sleepers in the nulls. And then there are the walkers. The various leaders of the races are all at the Cataclysm stage. A total of 10, along with Mad White, makes it 11. Those human oldies seem to be hiding their cultivation somehow, but if Mad White respects them, they should also be at the Cataclysm stage. That means we've got around 15 Cataclysm stage experts against the Null's 10 walkers. This army is well matched against the sleepers and the walkers. But the real problem is the 3 wanderers. There's literally no one at the pseudo-eternal stage on this battlefield. Even Mad White is only as strong as the peak Cataclysm stage. Ryuk furrowed his brows as he watched the area around him immediately unfold into chaos. Boom! The sound of ammunition being fired rang out as Ryuk watched the humans' mothercrafts send out their jets, and various warriors dressed in mecha-like armor began jumping out. Flames burst from beneath their feet as they raced into the sky. The 10 families were not far behind as they also surged forward, colliding in a clash of power with the sleeper nulls. Boom! A terrifying explosion rocked the entire battlefield, spreading destruction as the floor beneath Ryuk cracked apart. Scars stretched in all directions. Yet, amidst the chaos, he remained standing in the same position. A strange aura descended. An aura that made him feel as if he was in another dimension entirely, overlooking the battlefield like a god. It was a surreal aura, the aura of being above all the unfurling chaos and destruction. Can you sense me too? Ryuk's lips moved in a whisper as he raised his face to the sky, looking at the 3 wanderers who remained unmoving, just like him. At this moment, they were the only ones on the battlefield that hadn't moved, seemingly beyond the chaos. And then, slowly, Ryuk's grin widened as he watched the 3 wanderers slowly turn their heads toward him. And then, the space around them was devoured by a black hole that snaked toward Ryuk. Like broken glass slowed down under time. The world seemed to undergo a sudden pause. Yet, a breath of cold air escaped Ryuk's lips, drowning out the sounds of explosions and shattering space. Slowly, he raised his hand forward. Hey, system. Input all possessed ability upgrade cards into the Void Vortex skill. Following host's orders. All 15 upgrade cards have been used on Void Vortex. Congratulations, host. Void Vortex level has risen from level 1 to level 15. Activate Void Vortex. The order escaped Ryuk's lips as the black hole inched mere inches away from his face. In the next instant, the space before him collapsed into nothing, resulting in a pitch-black vortex that instantly opened. And in the next moment, the approaching black hole dispersed into the void. Stretching his hand to the side, Ryuk pulled at the space, tearing open a second vortex. And then, in the next instant, he stepped into it. Both vortexes closed behind him. Boom! A devastating explosion that shook the entire battlefield descended. A massive abyss, bottomless and endless, carved itself into the earth, causing a massive shockwave. Various commanders turned their gazes toward the abyss. Half a second. No, it is lesser than that. And all they saw was the space around the Wanderers suddenly dilating. And then, they were gone. The Wanderers have disappeared. Some of the commanders gasped, their eyes scanning the battlefield in shock, searching for any trace of the missing Wanderers. Quick! Call for support. Some of the commanders ordered hastily. But amidst the chaos, one person remained unmoved, his eyes sinking as his brows wrinkled. Wait, where's Ryuk? Boom! The sound of mountain ranges exploding into nothingness resounded through the world. 3 purple streaks, like meteors, crashed into a row of mountains whose peaks reached halfway into the sky. Mysteriously, the mountains exploded into fragments of rock. And then, even those fragments of rock dispersed into tiny pebbles. And then those pebbles crumbled into dust. Before, boom, the meteors collided with the ground, reducing it to nothing but a dark, endless pit, its depth an abyss where light could never reach. Finally, a voice echoed out, seemingly from the void itself. A leg slowly stepped out of the dark vortex that had appeared in the middle of the sky. The newcomer was none other than a white-haired human, his face emotionless, his hair flapping wildly from the intense winds of the sky. His shining crimson eyes stared at the abyss on the ground. Now, there will be none getting wounded or killed but one or all of us 4. Ryuk mused aloud as he watched the entire ground begin rumbling with power. And then, cracks spread through the entire ground before it blew apart as 3 purple-clad figures burst out of the abyss, hovering in the air above Ryuk. Their narrowed eyes looked around, scanning the seemingly endless mountain range stretching as far as they could see. And then, their gazes returned to the lone figure standing before them. Ryuk witnessed a ripple emerge from beneath the masks on their faces as a crimson rune appeared, shining ever so faintly across its surface. And then, a dam of energy burst open. On the vast mountain range that stretched through the distance, mountains suddenly began crumbling, like rain falling from the clouds as the air itself began humming with dread. In the sky, 3 towering figures stood amidst the chaos, their armor undulating with purple abyssal flames that devoured the space around them. Then, an incredibly powerful roar tore the sky apart, ringing out through the world as if to dissolve the heavens into absolute nothingness. Clouds dissolved, for thousands of miles, leaving only a void of eerie darkness. Space itself cracked, unable to withstand the sheer force of their power. Then, boom! The purple flames around them exploded inward as their armored forms began burning brightly, like a mortal ascending into an ultimate form. In the face of these invincible powerhouses stood Ryuk, seemingly rooted to the air. His hair flailed wildly from the intense aura, his shirt dissolving into nothing but ashes, revealing well-toned muscles. Yet instead of fear, all one could see in his crimson eyes was fever. a fever to the point of madness flashing in those crimson depths. The one that stole his attention the most among the trio was the armored Null, standing at 4 meters tall, towering twice above Ryuk's own height. His body was grotesquely muscular, his armored frame appearing to decay yet constantly reforging itself. His armor was thick and jagged, with dangling abyssal chains over every joint, knees, elbows, as if keeping the decay in check. His left arm was twice the size of his right, a massive gauntlet of abyssal bone and corrupted purple metal worn upon it. His face was partially covered by a mask, but his exposed lower jaws revealed sharp abyssal fangs and decayed mist that seeped from his breath. Ryuk's gaze scanned it from head to toe before the notification panel appeared. Warning. Analysis complete. Host has met with Verkil, the rotting tyrant. A lost being recorded in the system's database as one of the loyal legions of the 7th Calamity. The second one, who was the smallest of the three, was the one Ryuk had noticed exiting the Null portal first amongst the Wanderers. Even though the smallest, he still stood more than a head taller than Ryuk, at 3 meters in height. Yet his form was ever shifting, his body flickering between solid and shadow-like states. His armor was thin and almost liquid, swirling like ink in water, with his limbs unnaturally long and clawed, moving in ways that defied nature. His face was hidden beneath a smooth, mask-like helmet, making him featureless save for 2 glowing purple eyes. His shoulders extended into tattered abyssal wings, resembling a flowing cape of darkness that hummed amidst the vestiges of cracked space shards around them. Warning. Foe analysis complete. Resources found. Host has come across Xiphos, the Devouring Shade, a lost being recorded in the system's database as one of the loyal legions of the 7th Calamity. The last Null was a towering humanoid, nearly 5 meters in height. He had a bulky but streamlined abyssal armor, seamlessly covered in glowing abyssal engravings. His arms were unnaturally long, with clawed fingers that seemed so sharp they could cut through reality itself. He wore a peculiar helmet that had 3 curved abyssal horns, and where his forehead ought to be is a single abyssal eye that never blinked. Foe analysis ongoing. Resources found. Host has come across Sarek, the Abyss Harbinger, a lost being recorded in the system's database as one of the loyal legions of the 7th Calamity. The monstrous power oozing from the trio was enough to make Ryuk feel as if a mountain the size of a world was descending onto his chest. But then, his smile widened to his ears as he slowly spread his arms apart. Come now. Hit me with your best shots. Will you? Ha ha ha. A loud laughter, brimming with incredible mockery, left Ryuk's lips as he felt the world pause for an instant and then, boom! Ryuk's entire right chest caved in absolutely as the something pierced his right chest. A claw bursting out from behind him and then, boom! Ryuk's own chest was ripped apart, as space itself shattered behind him from the sheer force. He was sent flying, smashing into a mountain range and crushing a total of 5 mountains before, boom! A massive burst of flames erupted from Ryuk's form due to the friction. Yet through the red billowing flames, that same grin remained, as Ryuk felt a presence slip outside time and space behind him. He felt the space around him decaying and then, it was the sound of a gentle touch on his back, as a shockwave erupted in a circular motion with Ryuk's body halting mid-air from the sheer force. But then, boom! A powerful shockwave boomed out, as Ryuk was forcefully propelled forward towards where he was coming from. And midway, his body began rotting away, his upper body soon dissolving into nothing but ashes, and then, the sound of something being ripped apart rang out as a figure appeared beside Ryuk, sneakingly slipping out from the void, its wings cleaving out like blades, and instantly, Ryuk's leg and arm burst into thousands of sliced pieces as one of the Nulls appeared right above him barely a second later, both of its black arm reaching into the sky and forming into a large fist. And then, boom! A devastating explosion rocked the entire world as the punch smashed straight onto the top of Ryuk's head, cracks running from his forehead straight down to his jaw. His right eye instantaneously burst into nothing, blood spraying out, and then, boom! His body plummeted from the sky, smashing into the ground with incredible force. A gigantic abyss opened upon the ground. And then, silence. Absolute silence covered the entire mountain range. The three wanderer nulls appeared right above the abyss that Ryuk had crashed into, slowly descending down into it, not at all disturbed by the pitch darkness. As they soon arrived at the bottom, they found a head with a neck and a chest, buried face flat onto the ground, deader than dead. A silent growl escaped the lips of the hovering null wanderers as they looked at the seemingly half-eaten body buried into the ground. They looked at each other, crimson runes appearing on their foreheads before they slowly rose out of the abyss, leaving Ryuk. But then, "Do you not understand?" The words echoed behind them as they all instantly turned their heads back down, finding Ryuk's battered figure slowly raising his neck. His cracked face revealed a grin that had never left since the beginning. "I said, hit me with your best shot." Ryuk's low growl sounded out as the null took their gaze away from him, turning to look upwards, where they found some body parts rapidly soaring forward with incredible speed. In the next instant, one of them reacted instinctively, as Vikral hands reached out once more. An incredible amount of decay rippled out from his body. In an instant, the body parts they were intent on catching up to Ryuk decayed into nothing but ashes. Then, the null wanderers turned their gaze back to Ryuk, but all they saw was a figure slowly rising to his feet. Vortex of nanobots and blood concentrated around his sliced figure. In silence, they watched as Ryuk's arms soon regenerated, the same for his legs and the hole in his heart. Even though it took long to describe, Ryuk's entire body had already healed up in exactly 5 seconds, returning to its original state. "So you, the big and muscular one, are called Vikral. You reduce everything you touch to ashes by rapidly decaying their body into nothing. You control an abyssal energy mixed with the power of rot and decay. An interesting ability." Ryuk mused out loud, his hand placed under his chin in deep thought. "And you, the smallest one, are called Xiphos. You seem to be one with the void, able to teleport almost instantaneously, and your wings are the second sharpest blades I have ever seen, able to reduce anything to sliced bits. And you, Sarek, have your extra-long hands that can elongate even more within half the fraction of a split second. Your claws have some sort of explosive ability or something. That explains why my chest not only got ripped apart, but also exploded into nothing." Ryuk mused before he cracked his neck bones and shoulders, the clear sound of cracking bones ringing out like lightning. "Well then, let's get down to it," he said. Sarek and Xiphos instantly slipped into the void, and then, boom, the air at his side exploded as they slid out from the void. A claw blasted out from Ryuk's side, none other than from Sarek's sharp fingers. From the other side, a wing pierced out like a sword towards Ryuk's ribs. But this time, Ryuk decided to make his move. Activate Frozen Physique. In the next instant, ripples surged through Ryuk's entire body as his skin rapidly became translucent. Then, the sound of 2 more arms bursting out from beneath Ryuk's shoulders rang out as his arms instantly slammed outward toward the approaching attack. Boom! A dull sound resonated through the abyss, further widening it as Ryuk's clawed hand locked firmly with the claw coming for his left side. His other hand grabbed the wing sword heading for him, stopping it in place. In an instant, he had locked down both attacks. But then, boom! The air before Ryuk exploded into nothing as a rot-covered hand emerged out from the void in front of his face, heading straight toward his face. But then Ryuk called out, "Activate Void Vortex." In the next instant, a void opened up right in front of his face as the rotten hand heading for him entered into the vortex instead. And then, boom! The null with the blade wings was suddenly sent flying off into the distance as a void materialized by the side of its face. From within, a dark hand emerged, smashing into its head and sending it flying into the distance. Boom! Vikral's chest caved in as Ryuk kicked out toward him with lightning-fast speed. Yet, it reacted incredibly fast, managing to cross both of his arms, barely blocking the attack, although he was instantly sent flying into the distance. Now, left was Sarek, whose claws Ryuk still had in his grasp. "Tell me," That unblinking eye on your head. It can't be for decoration, can it? Ryuk asked as his claw slashed forward toward Sarek's head with incredulous speed and power. The space before Ryuk was instantly sliced apart into nothing from the sharpness of his claws, inching closer and closer to Sarek's head, seemingly promising to rip it into nothing. Yet, a bright light suddenly covered the entire air, blasting onto Ryuk's face as his body suddenly slowed massively, even though his sensory acuity remained at full speed. Helplessly, he watched as Sarek dodged his head to the ground, his claw barely missing, and then, Sarek's own claw blasted outward toward Ryuk's heart with immense speed. The air on its path slashed into nothing, but then, boom! The floor beneath Ryuk crumbled into nothing as the claw ripped through his heart. Yet, it passed through nothing but an afterimage. Ryuk appeared behind Sarek's back and then, his two hands tore forward toward its chest with speed. Instantly, they ripped through the decayed bones and body, slicing through the spines like nothing before tearing out from its chest. Ryuk felt the dark blood rain down his hands, surprisingly dissolving into nothing as Sarek shot away from him. He watched as his own hands continued rotting before ice daggers materialized in his other arms. With a clean motion, he sliced apart the remaining damaged arms, cutting away the rotting parts. Boom! The air before the severed arms shook, and instantly, two new pairs of arms burst out from beneath Ryuk as he slowly turned his gaze above him. There, he sighted the three nulls floating in the air. "Scared?" he asked tauntingly. Instantly, the nulls shot forward toward him with blinding speed. But to that, Ryuk slowly spread all four arms apart before he suddenly clenched all four at once. Instantly, the ground beneath Ryuk turned glassy from intensely oozing ice, and in the next instant, boom! Gigantic ice crystals with sharp and jagged bodies erupted from the ground. As the three null wanderers rushing toward Ryuk instantly soared into the sky, trying to avoid the sharp pillars of ice energy. Yet, it kept chasing after their figures until they were all thrown out of the abyss. Boom! The icy ground beneath Ryuk shattered into pieces as he jumped out of the pit hole, appearing in the sky before the nulls, and in the next instant, the air behind his back shifted backward, space shrinking into pure chaos, and in the next instant, he was before Vikrul, with a powerful punch blasting outward toward its face. Vikrul reacted instantaneously, its huge arms blasting against Ryuk's own fist. Boom! A devastating ripple surged out from the collision between the two massive fists, but Ryuk didn't pause at all as his three remaining arms simultaneously punched forward toward Vikrul. They were so heavy that space rippled like water towards Vikrul, who slammed down its other fist, taking another first into a pause. But then, Ryuk had four fists in his frozen physique form, with the two remaining fists suddenly unfurling back to claws which instantly tore into Vikrul's body. Corrosive blood burst out of Vikrul's lips as Ryuk's claws tore into its body, ripping apart organs from within, and then, blood burst out from its side as Ryuk roughly tore out his arms before his kick slammed forward towards Vikrul's chest, caving it in completely. But before Vikrul shot backward from the force, Ryuk grabbed its neck, holding it in place, resulting in his leg extending from pure force until the sound of something being ripped through rang out as Ryuk's legs tore out from Vikrul's back. Suddenly, boom! A heavy explosion resounded as Ryuk's figure was sent tumbling through the sky, behind him trailing purple flames that incinerated his body, and then, the ground caved in as he smashed it. Boom! It hadn't been a second later when the ground caved into nothingness. A figure shot outward from the caved-in ground, none other than Ryuk, who appeared before the flaming purple null. Immediately, four daggers appeared in his arms, and he catapulted them forward with speed towards Sarek, who seemed to have turned into a purple inferno. Immediately, a huge cloud of purple flames appeared behind Sarek before they all blasted downward toward Ryuk, seemingly covering his figure like a meteor of flames. Yet, Ryuk didn't pause his motion at all, as thousands of ice swords formed behind him, and instantly, they all catapulted towards each and every one of the balls. Boom! The collision of balls and swords was unending, smoke rising to the sky. Yet a second later, The cloud of smoke split apart as a figure flashed forward with speed toward Sarek, whose flaming purple hands slammed down. Yet, the world came to a stop as Ryuk mysteriously appeared behind Sarek. In his hands, a new set of jagged daggers. But what was equally bizarre about them was that each dagger had shattered into half, and a smirk laid on Ryuk's lips as a line slowly appeared on Sarek's open palms, tearing straight through its entirety before continuing down to its main body, which was soon had a line run through it. Sarek's body fell into two parts that unceremoniously dropped from the sky to the ground. Boom! The ground caved in with Sarek's fall, as the dagger in Ryuk's hand dispersed, and he turned his gaze to the remaining two Null Wanderers who remained in the sky, their eyes on the fallen body of their comrade. 1 down, 2 to go. Ryuk turned towards the floating figure of Vikrul, soon appearing before him instantly. Immediately, Vikrul let out a roar of defiance as Ryuk watched the chains that dangled from its wrists suddenly snap and tauten, snaking toward Ryuk, soon covering all of his sight, until a ball of chains was formed around Ryuk, an inch away from Vikrul, and they completely wrapped him, covering his entire vision. Yet, cleek! The sound of something being ripped apart resounded as the wave of chains was instantly sliced into nothing, and bursting out was a new figure. It was Ryuk, except with a veil of nanobots covering his shimmering translucent frozen physique. In his hand, a humongous scythe which appeared before Vikrul, and then, Ryuk's scythe cleaved out so fast they became a blur of speed that formed a cage of scythe marks all over Vikrul. And when Ryuk stopped, the Null Wanderer had become nothing but a pool of putrid dark liquid that slowly fell onto the ground like rain, sliced into nothing. Second one down, just one more to go, Ryuk said as he turned in the sky to look at Xiphos, who slowly took steps backward. But then, activate Void Vortex, Ryuk ordered as a portal appeared in front of Xiphos, and instantly, he disappeared into it, only for another portal to appear right in front of the path of Ryuk's cleaving scythe. And then, Ryuk's scythe turned into thousands of afterimages as Xiphos' liquid body was sliced so fast. He had been reduced to nothing but mere liquid soon dripping from the ground, suffering the same fate as Vikrul. Ah! A cold breath of air left Ryuk's lips as he remained in the air, his eyes looking at the devastated bodies on the ground before he exhaled in relief. In the end, they managed to force me to activate my frozen physique and even activate nano-abyssal transformation just to deal with them. Ryuk mused to himself as he prepared to recall his transformation. But then, he stopped in shock as his gaze instinctively settled on the pool the Null had left behind. And then he watched as a bizarre crimson runic circle suddenly appeared in these pools of energy. And then, boom! A pillar of pure dark energy shot into the sky, so powerful that Ryuk felt himself being lifted across space and sent exactly 100 meters backward uncontrollably before he halted himself to a stop, his eyes flashing in shock when he looked forward. Impossible! The roar of disbelief left Ryuk's lips as he looked forward and found 3 beings standing on their feet. What was shocking was that they were none other than the 3 figures he had cleaved into nothing, making sure he absolutely destroyed them both in bodies and souls. Not only were they back, but they were without any sign of injuries, and to make things worse, their auras seemed to have increased by a significant amount compared to the last time. Tch! Ryuk clicked his tongue distastefully as he took a step forward. Space beneath his feet shattered into pieces, and he appeared to launch himself off the cracked ground when he suddenly halted in the air, watching as the Null's bodies suddenly began spasming crazily, as if under the control of some otherworldly force. And then, an incredibly mind-shaking roar burst out from their lips as Ryuk's eyes widened in shock, witnessing a monumental change. The Nulls were not just healed and back again. Now they were transforming into something else. The first transformation started with Sarek, whom Ryuk had previously cleaved in two. Not only had he regained his body, towering over 5 meters once again, but his entire torso suddenly ripped open, revealing within it a roaring abyssal core that seemed no different from a miniature black hole, swirling with intense devouring darkness that made Ryuk's heart quake within him. Sarek's already elongated arms tripled in length, his fingers splitting into multiple jagged energy blades that rang with pure destruction. His helmet disintegrated, revealing a featureless, luminous face. The singular eye he previously possessed had transformed into a singular abyssal eye, shining with such bright light that it ripped apart space like a blade. Below his waist, his legs disappeared, morphing into a flaming abyssal vortex, making him hover above the ground, space warping beneath him. One word could describe Sarek's transformation: horrific, but compared to Verkrul it was clearly lacking. Verkrul, who had been reduced to a pool of liquid, had reformed his grotesquely muscular body, which was now beyond recognition. His armor had exploded and fell apart, fully revealing the undead horror beneath, his mummified flesh pulsing with abyssal energy. His left arm, which was already double the size of his right, extended further until it became a massive abyssal claw, dripping with black, decaying liquid. Ryuk watched as the liquid rained to the ground, instantly melting it away. In mere seconds, the entire battlefield beneath him had melted into nothingness. Verkrul's legs morphed into abyssal roots that latched deep into the earth, corrupting the land intensely. Ryuk watched as the entire air and ground darkened, a deep darkness enveloping everything. A domain? He wondered in shock, feeling an exhausting aura and the incredibly strong hold pressing down on him as if trying to shut down his movements completely. Verkrul's head split open into a vertical abyssal maw, revealing rows of fangs and an endless void of blackness inside. Instead of arms, abyssal chains snaked around his tree-like body, whipping in the air and dripping with flesh-consuming liquid. The last transformation belonged to the one who had suffered the most at Ryuk's hands, Xiphos himself. Instead of regaining his body, Xiphos' liquid gas form collapsed into a swirling black mass, surging high into the sky, forming a nightmarish gas-like colossus with every inch of his body covered in blinking abyssal eyes. His claws elongated, splitting into dozens of bladed, spindly arms. His head expanded, becoming a massive, eerie abyssal grin, filled with shifting teeth that never remained the same. His body no longer moved normally. Instead, it warped in shadows, disappearing and appearing at will. On his chest was a slit humming with an unknown energy, but whatever lay within was enough to make Ryuk's hair stand on end simply by looking at it. The three wanderers, now in their ultimate forms, gazed upon the ruined battlefield before settling their eyes on Ryuk, who felt as if he was standing before an apocalypse waiting to happen. "You all just know how to exceed my expectations, don't you?" Ryuk mused to himself as he inhaled a deep breath before his eyes turned intensely cold. This time he could feel the faintest scent of death in the air. These beings before him, they weren't opponents he could take on while smiling anymore. He needed to take this seriously or he might as well just be buried here. A breath of shaky, cold air left Ryuk's lips as his right hand lifted his scythe upright, while his three remaining hands instantly had massive blades of ice slip into them. In an instant, a burst of frigid energy spread into the air, but soon, they condensed until a total of 7,200 swords of ice. All that Ryuk could manage with his mana appeared behind him, floating and radiating such sharpness that they tore apart space like nothing. "Let's end this," he declared, before the space beneath his feet shattered into pieces as he rushed forward like an unstoppable warrior. Behind him, the thousands of swords surged like an army, rapidly chasing after him as Ryuk sped towards the Nulls, who instantly made their move. The Colossus Xiphos took a single step forward, abyssal energy rippling before his feet. Then, the slit on his chest opened up, revealing a blackened void, and instantly, it was as if a black hole had been unleashed into the world. A jet-like force tore through the air and space, instantly sucking everything into it. Ryuk felt an uncontrollable force dragging him along with his sword solidly toward Xiphos' open void. But he didn't resist. Instead, he used the force to move even faster, slamming his leg into the ground as he prepared to rise up into the air and cleave forth when suddenly, he felt something wrap tightly around his ankles and then, boom! The ground caved in as a figure with chains on its ends was sent crashing into the battlefield, carving an unending abyss into the ground. A breath of sharp inhale left Ryuk's lips as one of his eyes rolled to the back of his head. He lost control of his summoned swords, which were instantly swallowed by the void on Zypho's chest. Boom! It was like a child slamming a soft pillow into the bed. Except that wasn't a pillow. It was Ryuk himself, being smashed into the ground left and right before he was roughly thrown away. Boom! His body crashed through a total of 7 mountains, shattering through the unyielding stone before finally slamming into the 8th one. A loud gasp of pain escaped his lips as cracks spread through the mountain's surface, yet it managed to hold. Blood burst out of his lips like a broken tap as his body slid down from the cracked mountain beneath him. Blood rained from the upper part of his face, as his nano veil rippled immediately, trying to repair itself, yet a dark, putrid force clung to it, massively slowing down its regenerative power. The sound of something rapidly moving forward awakened Ryuk as he raised his gaze, only to find numerous claws that reeked of pure destruction inching toward his face. In an instant, boom! The mountain range finally crumbled to pieces as Ryuk threw his back against it, resulting in its collapse. He watched as the claws slashed mere inches away from his face. Boom! The claws tore through the mountain range, reducing it to nothing but rubble. Ryuk took a step forward and shot into the distance, only for him to suddenly stop when he felt a brilliant flare of light that unconsciously pulled his gaze toward it. Horror flashed in his eyes as he realized. I can't move, he thought in shock. His gaze locked onto the colossal null, the eyes covering its entire body, which once could only slow him down, now brought his speed to an absolute standstill. The sound of rumbling howls rang out as Ryuk screamed, "Damn it!" internally. But it all came to an end when something tore out into him. The moment he felt himself finally break free from the restrictive force, blood seeped out from his lips. Slowly, his legs left the earth as he was raised into the sky by massive claws before. Ryuk's hands fell limply to his sides as 2 more claws emerged, ripping apart his hands and legs before a powerful force exploded behind him, sending him flying toward the decayed Vecronal. He had yet to arrive before Vecronal when chains erupted from the ground like roots, piercing through him continuously with enough force to make him hang in the air. He groaned miserably, his blood splattering continuously over the area. The motion finally stopped and Ryuk's body, if it could still be called that, fell unconscious onto the floor. Instead, what lay on the ground were soft flesh and tissues riddled with gaping holes burning across their entire length. Kaboom! The sound of heavy stomping resounded through the entire world 3 times as the colossal null's giant legs slammed onto Ryuk's already battered figure before it finally came to a stop. The colossal null lifted its massive leg away from him. Below, there was an unending abyss whose depths they couldn't see at all, but they didn't need to wait long before a voice came. "So what, you bastards?" They watched as a single hand, covered in metal with no flesh or blood, appeared at the edge of the abyss. Not long after, Ryuk pulled himself back up from the pit. His teeth clenched, grinding against his lips from the pain, blood raining down from both eyes. But he felt something else, a deep sense of disgust that overpowered even the pain he was currently feeling. He loathed the existence of his foes, a nauseating hatred that came from the very deepest root of his being. "So what if you smash me into the ground? So what if you reduce me to bits? I'll just keep getting back up again and again to spit on your ugly faces," Ryuk roared in mockery, mixed with fury, as the colossal null raised its leg high above his head and then, boom! The world cracked down as the gigantic, abyssal mass, thousands of folds heavier than Ryuk, slammed down with horrific power. Yet, Isha! Room! Immediately, the gigantic foot crashed down toward Ryuk. But just before it could hit, a snow-white light flashed at speeds unattainable. The colossal null didn't need to look at the result. It simply gazed up into the distance and noticed a snow-white figure flying in the air, and behind it was none other than Ryuk himself. His hands moved, and suddenly, a vial appeared in his grasp. Ryuk drowned it without hesitation. Instantly, a powerful golden light emanated from his body as his nano-veil immediately increased its regenerative speed, restoring him enough to gain a second wind. And in the next instant, he ordered, "Activate King's Aura." Instantly, A powerful aura undulated from Ryuk and Isha as their eyes shone completely blue. An incredibly powerful roar left Isha's lips as her rank shot up from the core stage of the Cataclysm realm to the peak stage until it came to rest just before the boundaries of the pseudo-eternal stage. But that wasn't enough. Domain expansion. Ryuk called out boldly as his fingers crossed against each other. In an instant, the words seemed to lose their sound, replaced instead by a shifting reality. Winter's Solace. Instantly, the three Null Wanderers felt the world around them rapidly zoom by, and in an instant, the darkness that once obstructed the sky and ground was instantly wiped away, replaced by a blanketed world of snow. The mountains in the area became overlapped with lonely snow peaks, the entire world turning into a frozen realm of ice and snow, with snowflakes endlessly falling from the sky. Ah! A breath of extremely cold air surged out of Ryuk's lips as he felt the power coursing through his veins. The sensation of absolute control over the entire area dawned upon him. Rapidly, his nano-veil became translucent ice once more, and the snowflakes in the area suddenly began to swirl around Ryuk's figure until they returned him to his real health, fully covering his skin, which turned to translucent ice. His snowy hair glowed with an otherworldly white light while radiating an intense coldness. But still, it wasn't enough for Ryuk. "Come to me, abyssal howlers." In the next instant, the air around Ryuk howled violently as his hair flapped intensely, gravity in the domain seeming to double. All of it stemmed from the object that soon appeared in Ryuk's grasp, brimming with cold, icy light. The jagged pistols, the perfect incarnation of death and destruction, found its rightful seat in Ryuk's palms as his gaze locked onto the three nulls before him. "We both will eliminate them, Isha. Fly around their figures and don't get caught. I'll take them down one by one," Ryuk instructed. Isha's four wings flapped, and she soared to the side, flying in an arc around the nulls before suddenly, the sound of air ringing out as the colossal null's chest opened up once more, the entire world seemingly being pulled by an incredibly powerful force. But then, Isha suddenly opened her maws, a powerful condensed ball of ice energy swirling within them. It gathered for a few seconds before. Kaboom! A vast, rune-filled pillar of ice energy shot out from Isha, slamming straight into the open slit on the colossal null's chest. And then, a terrifying explosion strong enough to push the colossal null backward by 5 steps as the ground beneath its massive feet shattered into pieces. In the next instant, the sound of a faint howl echoed through the entire domain, and in an instant, the sound of space parting resounded as silvery objects shot through the world with speed. And then, a deafening explosion rocked the entire world as the colossal null suddenly had a gigantic hole opened up in its chest. Its colossal body collapsed backward before its descent was suddenly halted, as if stuck in time. "What the?" Ryuk thought in shock as he looked at the abyss where the colossal null had disappeared. His gaze then returned to his guns in horror. What is happening? The Abyssal Howlers has been activated. The skill Howl of Ruin has been activated. Active skill. Howl of Ruin. Cooldown. 60 seconds. Description: firing both pistols at once will unleash a sound-based shockwave that disorients enemies in a wide area. Any target struck by the bullets will suffer temporary paralysis from nervous disruption and an abyssal fear that clouds their thoughts with overwhelming dread. Abyssal remark: your body won't move, but your fear will. In the next instant, Ryuk didn't let the chance slip as he instantly fired his left pistol, then the right a moment later. But then, he watched as an infinite abyssal afterimage of pistols suddenly filled the air before him, and instantly, they all shot toward the paralyzed colossal null, which only just regained itself, only to be faced with a barrage of unending bullets, each detonating upon impact, resulting in incredibly powerful explosions. They cried out for 10 seconds straight before the chaos finally cleared, and Ryuk watched as the colossal null was nowhere to be found. Now, there was nothing but a blowing dark wind in the air where it ought to be, which soon dispersed into ashes. Congratulations! Host has successfully eliminated a pseudo-eternal grade null. Sarek the Abyss Harbinger. plus 1000000 EXP. I eliminated it? Ryuk asked himself in shock, barely believing it. But then, as he focused, a notification appeared, and he could only mutter in disbelief. But how? Active skill activated. Oblivion's Echo, 1 hour cooldown. Description: firing the left pistol followed by firing the right a second later will not only hit once, but create an infinite abyssal afterimage of bullets. The shots repeat themselves multiple times in the exact same spot, stacking destruction exponentially until even reality itself cannot withstand the impact. This attack shreds through existence, bypassing defenses and reducing everything in its path into pure, absolute nothingness. Abyssal remark: if the first bullet doesn't kill you, the 100th in the same spot will. Suddenly, the sound of swerving woke Ryuk as he felt himself being flung forward, whisked away by Isha. Behind them, the monstrous entity Xiphos moved effortlessly, its clawed hand rapidly snaking toward her. But Isha was like the wind, impossible to catch, as she skillfully weaved through with incredible speed. Ryuk instantly raised his guns, pointing them toward the creature. And then, a notification flashed before his gaze. Passive skill activated. Predatory mark, no cooldown. Description: a shot after the skill activation will leave an abyssal mark on the target. Marked targets are drained of energy, weakened over time, and they amplify shot trajectories so that the next shot will meet a vital point. In the next instant, howling sounds filled the air with every shot Ryuk fired as Xiphos weaved through the bullets, something slashing at it and cleaving parts away. But instead of being left alone, the wounds continued to widen, slowing it down as Ryuk continued shooting forward. Chains shot up from the ground, an attack that came from Vernok. But Isha reacted instantly, soaring higher in the air, diving deeper into the clouds before phasing through them eventually. Vernok's chains eventually were out of sight, unable to reach her because the null itself was tethered to the ground with its roots. That left just Ryuk and Isha alone with Xiphos in the air as both groups stared at each other. And Ryuk's eyes flashed before a sinister grin appeared on his lips. "Let's go hunting, Isha," he said, but barely a second later. Isha's wings lifted off, soaring towards Xiphos, who also shot forward. Midway, Isha opened her maw and fired another ice pillar breath attack towards Xiphos, and the null roared forward with speed, its claws ripping forward, slashing against Isha's own ice pillar, and then both attacks collided into each other as Xiphos' claws tore through the pillar of ice, its claws continuing towards Isha, who instantly weaved below, phasing through the slits of sharp claws, dodging by the thread of her skin. But then, Xiphos' eyes flashed as it detected something. Ryuk was no longer on Isha. In the instant it turned to face the side, barely catching sight of Ryuk, shooting to the opposite side of Isha, in midair, his hair flapping wildly as the twin muzzles of Abyssal Howler's muzzles were pointed right at the creature, locked onto its figure. The howling was like that of the abyss as two silvery bullets blasted out of the Abyssal Howlers. The resultant force sent Ryuk tanking backward with speed. A sharp kacha, the sound of his shoulder bones shattering to pieces, rang out, yet he smiled through the pain as he watched the bullets appear instantaneously before Xiphos, whose eyes widened in shock. In the next instant, Xiphos reacted, as all of its claws instantly lashed toward the two bullets. But then, Xiphos' entire arms burst into pieces the moment they came into contact with the bullets, which continued on their path. One of them lodged straight into its neck, instantly blasting off its entire head, while the other appeared on Xiphos' chest, and then, boom! A gigantic hole appeared as the entirety of Xiphos' upper body was blown into nothing, his void-like essence fading into the air. Congratulations! Host has successfully eliminated a null wanderer, Xiphos. Rewards? Plus 100,000 EXP. In the next instant, Ryuk felt his back slam into a hard scale as Isha instantly appeared behind him, picking him back onto her back, and then, boom! Shockwaves undulated behind her as she shot down through the clouds with horrific speed, flashing forward toward the last null. When Ryuk saw the ground once more, He observed that it had been completely covered in those huge chains that sought to bind their movement. But Isha never stopped at all as she opened her maws, blasting ice pillars ahead, freezing the chains and slowing them down just enough for her to swiftly weave through them. When they wrapped around her, her claws moved out and slashed them into pieces before she continued on her way toward Bernal, unperturbed. Mana left. 50. Endurance. 20. Warning. Host is in a critical state. All active abilities have been suspended. The notification flashed before Ryuk's hazy eyes as he felt himself lose all of his activated skills, his domain unraveling, and his king's aura dissipating into nothing. Yet his eyes remained on Vernal, flashing as he located a core at the center of Vekranlil's tree-like structure. Ryuk readied his bullet. The world seemed to fade away under his focus, leaving just him and his target alone. The abyssal howlers faced their prey before. 2 howls resounded as the bullets tore out with speed, the same time as about 300 chains instantly wrapped at all over Isha's figure, slamming her body into the ground. A single chain cut through Ryuk, separating his arm and half his upper body away from him. Red veins coated Ryuk's eyes from the horrific pain as blood burst out of his lips. His body collapsed to the side, crashing through the ground and skidding harshly across its surface before finally coming to a stop. But as a nauseating, evil smirk laid on his lips, he looked forward, finding his shot appearing before Vernal, who now had thousands of abyssal, rotting chains appearing around his body, covering him completely. "It's futile," Ryuk called out, and just like he said, the gun ripped through the cocoon of chains covering Vernal before instantly blasting into its body. For a few moments, nothing happened. Then suddenly, kaboom! A terrifying explosion rocked the entire world, reaching into the skies as Vernal's body exploded with a loud bang. A powerful storm raged through the entire place, blasting Ryuk's body away, slamming him into a mountain as blood burst out of him for the second time. His body hit the ground face flat, only to land on Isha's scaled back. "Here, Isha. Fly." That was the last thing Ryuk could say as a vial appeared in his hand before the world finally descended into pitch darkness, and he fell onto the ground, absolutely battered. Isha's eyes furrowed at the vial in her hands before she popped open the bottle, downing half of it before pouring the remainder into Ryuk's lips. Then, with one swift motion, she lifted Ryuk onto her back before soaring into the clouds with speed, disappearing from the area. Barely a minute after Isha disappeared, 3 beings appeared. The crumbling mountains halted in the sky as if gravity had been paused completely, with the air refusing to move an inch and space-time itself being placed into disarray from the monstrous power oozing from these beings. Their eyes looked at the devastation carved in front of them, bearing no change in expression, before they turned their gaze to each other, some bit of light flashing in them. And in the next instant, space rippled around them as they faded into thin air, leaving the destruction as it was. "You're a fool. You know that, right?" The voice sounded out as the world slowly came into view. It appeared blurry, very blurry, but then it began settling as he felt control returning to him. His cognitive ability slowly returned before he felt his arms and legs once more. A long time passed, one he couldn't quite fathom, before he finally regained full control of his body and the world around him. Right now, he was in a sitting position, his back resting against the wall. Then, he turned his face forward, and there he found a throne room, but with 2 thrones instead. On one of them, the blue-scaled Ryuk sat. On the other, the crimson-scaled Ryuk. The one who had asked him that question was none other than the crimson-scaled Ryuk, whose furrowed eyes were on Ryuk's figure, brimming with anger. Ryuk also noticed that the blue-scaled Ryuk had the same expression, though to a lesser extent compared to the red-scaled one, seemingly of displeasure instead of anger. "Seems like I'm back here again," Ryuk muttered out loud as he relaxed his exhausted body, feeling the weirdly intense weakness that covered every part of him. But then, his eyes flashed open when a powerful air blast rang across the room, and in an instant, Ryuk's eyes bulged with red veins as he felt a hand wrap around his neck, lifting him up. The crimson-scaled Ryuk's eyes flashed with billowing anger. I said you're a fool. The blue-scaled Ryuk's words were like bombs slamming straight into Ryuk's mind, shaking him to his very core. He was half dead? Your life essence has been halved in the few minutes you used those weapons of yours. If you were supposed to live for 100 years before, now 50% of it is gone. Ryuk felt his heart pound violently within him. That's the price of using an ungodly weapon. Your life, something you, of all people, should be more worried about. The crimson-scaled Ryuk snapped harshly before sitting back on his throne. You see, cultivation enhances life force. A being at the origin stage, once they break through to the plane of ascension, will have their lifespan increased by up to 50 years. Take the favorite human race of that world that you love so much, for example. Their natural lifespan is 100 years. But once they begin cultivating and reach the plane of ascension, 50 more years are added, making their lifespan 150 years. If they break through the plane of ascension and reach the plane of dominion, their lifespan could double to 300 years. If they surpass that and reach the cataclysm stage, they could live for 500 years. And if they reach the eternal stage, they might even surpass 1,000 years, making them nearly immortal. The same happens to every race, with some capable of harvesting even more years depending on their bloodline purity and the energy they cultivate. But you are the only exception. The blue-scaled Ryuk's tone carried absolute certainty, making Ryuk's eyes widen. Your total lifespan was set in stone the day your body was ripped from you, leaving you incomplete. You can cultivate thanks to your consciousness still being present in your brain and the cultivation veins given to you by the one you call Uncle Bob. But to increase your lifespan through cultivation, you would need your entire body, whole and unbroken, which, of course, you don't have. So when you cultivate, you gain strength, but not life. The only way for you to gain life is by increasing your bloodline purity, and that can only be achieved by reclaiming your body. Your body contains an immense amount of your bloodline, a truly vast amount, if I may say so myself. If not, it wouldn't have been ripped from you in the first place. If you want life, you need to take back your body and reclaim your bloodline. If you keep losing your bloodline, you're killing yourself. Wait. Ryuk cut them off, a pressing question forming in his mind. Tell me, you said my lifespan was set in stone ever since my body was taken. And even though I've cultivated up to the cataclysm stage, it hasn't increased at all. If that's the case, then how many years do I have to live in the first place? The blue-scaled Ryuk's eyebrows furrowed slightly, a look of reluctance flashing across his face, as if debating whether to answer at all. But before he could answer, the crimson-scaled Ryuk scoffed and rose to his feet, stepping toward them with an amused smirk. You will only live for 50 years, he declared. Ryuk's heart sank, but he took a deep breath. Right now, he was 17. He still had time. But you lost a portion of your bloodline purity because of that stupid gift of yours, effectively having that time. What? Because of your foolishness, you now only have 25 years left, if not less. The crimson-scaled Ryuk relished the look of horror on Ryuk's face, savoring it as though it were the finest dish in the world. You're bluffing, right? Ryuk asked, but the other simply scoffed in disdain before returning to his throne. He's right, the blue-scaled Ryuk confirmed, and Ryuk's heart pounded even harder. I truly only have 25 years left to live. But don't forget, your lifespan is tied to your bloodline energy. As soon as you reclaim even a single piece of your body, your life essence will soar. In fact, when you had your complete body, you were known as the Eternal One, never dying, never aging. Yeah, keep living in the shadow of his past. The crimson-scaled Ryuk scoffed, unimpressed. Ryuk's erratic breathing slowed slightly as he processed everything. So I can still extend my life. I just need to get my body parts back. Even one of them, and I won't have to worry about my life essence anymore. He thought to himself. But how? How do I reclaim my body? Where are my body parts? He asked, realizing it was a question he had never considered before. The blue-scaled Ryuk slowly turned his back to him, and in the next instant he was back on his throne. We don't know either. But if there's one thing we do know, it's that there are people out there. People wearing your body parts as their own. When you come across them, you will sense it, and you will have to fight to take them back. For now, the only thing you can do is make sure you never touch that gun of yours again, unless you want your remaining 25 years to be halved even further. Also, those gnolls you fought? They were at the pseudo-eternal stage, weren't they? The blue-scaled Ryuk asked. Ryuk nodded. Well then, you'll soon meet their lord. He should have one of your body parts. Ryuk's eyes flashed with a brilliant light, but the crimson-scaled Ryuk scoffed, bringing him back to reality. Yeah, right. If I were in your shoes, I'd be thinking about how to survive him first before worrying about reclaiming what's mine. You have no idea what's coming for you. No idea at all. The crimson-scaled Ryuk said as a pang of fear filled Ryuk's heart, but then the world around him began collapsing as he felt himself being transported away from the realm.